Hello, and thank you for joining us for another Wednesdays in the Word. I am Pastor Autry, and we are coming to the end of our series here on The Chosen. Today, we're going to look at an issue that I think is important. Matter of fact, the link to the episode is in the chat. It's entitled 2 by 2 Season 3, Episode 2. And I just think there are two important issues that are raised in this video that we need to be aware of. And so in this video, we're going to raise the question, exactly what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus?
I'm going to go home to Nazareth for a time, and while I'm there, I'm sending you out in every direction, 2 by 2, specifically to our people only.
Every direction, Rabbi?
Yes, but not to the Gentiles. Not yet. That will come in time. But to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Just as Joshua led the 12 tribes to take the promised land. You will proclaim as you go, the kingdom of heaven is at hand.
So again, thank you for joining us. I apologize for dropping this video a little bit later than I normally do. It's just been that kind of week. Many of you all know that I've been in the process of moving my parents from Alabama to Dallas. My dad is 88, my mom is 85. They're both actually doing very well. But I really felt that we needed to be closer. And since I pastor in Dallas and had no intentions of going to Alabama to pastor, I raised the suggestion, why don't you guys move closer to us? Well, that has happened. They are here. And so thank you for all your prayers and support in the process. We're still transitioning, but they are here. They're in their own place, and we're just trying to get settled. And I surely and graciously appreciate your prayers and your support in that. And so today's session, again, it's Season 3, Episode 2, 2 by 2. And I just think it raises two important issues, which I'm going to read two biblical texts that are connected to this episode that I think are intricately tied to what it means to be a follower of Jesus, particularly in the modern era. The first one comes from Matthew chapter 5, verses 23 through 24. And here's what it says. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. And so obviously the issue there is reconciliation. And then the second one, and I'm going to give you just one text, but there are many texts that are tied to this issue that is raised in this episode. And that's found in Mark chapter 6, verse 7, where he says, calling the 12 to him, he began to send them, that is the disciples, out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over impure spirits. You can also tie Mark 6:7 to Matthew 10 and Luke 6, where you see similar sending outs or callings that Jesus sends out his disciples. And so we're going to look at those two issues in this video and help us to come to a deeper understanding of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And so number one, I really liked this episode because it raised the issue of reconciliation. And that's a word that we throw around in our Christian culture, and we tend to actually use it more in a vertical sense, and it does. The scriptures do speak of the gospel that it reconciles us with a holy God and unholy people with a holy God. 2 Corinthians 5 definitely speaks of reconciliation in that sense. But when Jesus uses it, as we gave to you in the Matthew 5 passage, verses 23 through 24, there's also this horizontal element. And sadly, in the Christian church, I think more so in the Western church, we tend to understand it, or we confine reconciliation to the vertical reality, almost at the expense of a horizontal reality. It's almost a sense that as long as we have the correct information about God, it doesn't matter about the relationships we have with other people. And nothing can be more incorrect on this point than any other issue. No, we're called to build relationships, build community with others, even those that disagree with us. So I just thought that was really a great issue that was raised in the episode, particularly between Matthew and his family, his father and mother.
Matthew, You don't owe us any money.
The debt isn't material. Yeah. I hurt you. And I hurt our community. And my rabbi also said that before we lay a sacrifice at the altar, if we know a brother has an offense against us, we should leave the sacrifice there and go be reconciled.
I lost my business because of you. And you are correct. We lost our reputations and friends.
I know.
But I had no right to reject you as my son. God should strike me down for the things I said to you. I was shameful. Can you forgive me? I only made things worse. I'm sorry.
We're sorry.
But what has changed? I sinned.
We saw him too, Matthew. We heard his sermon.
He's the teacher you're following.
Yes, he called me and I...
And you have already atoned. They were the most true words I have ever heard. Some of it shocking.
I know, I wrote it all down.
You are a scribe.
You will redeem our family's name.
Matthew, he chose you.
To this day, I don't know why.
Alphaeus,
What?
forgive him.
I did.
No, you didn't. You must say it.
I forgive you, son.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abba.
Thank you, Abba.
Obviously, his lifestyle as a tax collector and then even becoming a follower of Jesus was a little bit at odds with the family. And there's a sense that Matthew saw himself as offending his family. And he comes to them because now he's a follower and he wants to make it right. Now, clearly in this case, he is the offender. Well, what do you do if you're not the offender? And I think Jesus raises both issues in the Matthew 5 passage, whether you're offended or the offender. We all have a responsibility to the best of our ability to seek reconciliation, number one, specifically with other Christians, but then number two, with other individuals that we have relationship with. And so what do we mean by reconciliation? It's the bringing together of two or more parties into unity, harmony, or agreement by removing the cause of disharmony. This is what is called reconciliation. And it is central to what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And we kind of neglect it as a theological idea that's only understood in the vertical, but God wants us to apply it in the horizontal. And so what I want to do here, I just want to take a few moments and just give some pointers, 5 simple pointers for how we can have reconciliation with someone we may be at odds with, whether it's another Christian, whether it's a family member, whether it's an employee or a co-worker. It can even be an enemy, because even Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, we're to love our enemies. We're not to hate our enemies, wish for their destruction. But somehow that has really crept into the Christian consciousness here in America, that it's okay to hate those who may have a different political ideology or even a different ethnic perspective. And that is not the way of Jesus. That's what distinguishes us as his followers. And so we ought to seek reconciliation, but we ought to seek it in the right way. I'm surely not advocating that we ought to be doormats. We surely shouldn't let people treat us any kind of way. But we do have a responsibility, if we are truly followers of Christ, if we've been anointed by the Spirit, and many times if we're convicted by the Spirit, if our hearts are sincere, he will convict us, that we ought to reconcile with those that we might be at odds with. And so 5 elements that I want to suggest to you about reconciliation. Number 1, start with prayer. Pray. Start with prayer. And here you just want to make sure your heart is open. You want to make sure your heart is right. You know, sometimes we can attempt reconciliation and we're still hurting, we're still smarting. And surely there's an element where the hurt is deep and real, but at least we got to be in a place where we can actually be open and honest about reconciliation. We can't go in with damaged feelings and not even trying to resolve some of those feelings and expect reconciliation to happen. So I say, number one, we got to pray, ask God to prepare us, to prepare our hearts, give us open minds, to not take it personal, to seek a way to work through the issues, to pray for that person and that they would be open to hearing what you want to say in the issue. So I think that's the first thing. Number one is prayer. Number two, forgiveness. And this is a tough one. Forgiveness simply means to release, let it go. Don't wish upon them what they've done to you. And I know some of us say, well, I don't do that, Pastor, so therefore I forgive it. No, if we're holding on to it, if we won't let it go, there's a sense we're holding on to it because we're waiting for God to do something in them, or we're waiting for something to happen. So we hold on to it, refusing to let it go, refusing to forgive, refusing to release, really kind of passively hoping that something would happen to them. We may not express it that way. We may not say it like that. But when we hold on to it, that is what our actions or our behavior is communicating. Tim Keller, who recently passed away, incredible pastor, incredible scholar, has a great word on this. He says, look, when we hold on to it, we're trying to avoid the cost of the hurt. But when we let it go, there's a sense that in forgiveness, we do absorb some of the cost of the hurt. And he uses Jesus as the example. When Jesus hung on the cross to forgive the sinners and sins of the world, he absorbed the cost of forgiving. And so he uses an illustration where he says, you know, you go over a friend's house and you sit in their chair and you break their chair. And because they're a good friend, they may say, don't worry about it. You don't have to pay for it. I was going to buy a new chair anyway. Well, the fact that you don't have to pay for it and he lets it go doesn't mean there's not a cost in the loss. So even though he forgives and lets the individual go and doesn't charge them up, look, you owe me for the cost of that chair, he's absorbing the cost of the loss of the chair. And there is an element that when it comes to forgiveness, when it comes to letting go, we're very much like Jesus in that we're absorbing the costs. We're kind of bearing our own cross, but even with every cross, there is resurrection. And so we've got to forgive. We've got to let it go. And yes, there will be some pain. There will be some hurt, but through it, God shapes us. God molds us. God makes us more like him. God makes us stronger. God resurrects us in spite of the injury that has been caused to us. And so number two is forgiveness. Number three, conversation if possible. To at least openly and freely lay out on the table in a civil manner, not in an emotional manner, but in a civil manner, the differences or the issues that cause the breakup or the sense that you can't have a relationship. And I think that needs to happen if you can do that. Sometimes maybe you're not. And if you're not, that's just what it is. But at least attempt to try to have a conversation and talk through the differences if that is possible. Sometimes feelings are very, very damaged here, and it's very difficult to do that. Number four, you want to manage your expectations. I think sometimes when we come to forgiveness and reconciliation, the expectation is, well, everything will be fine now. And that's just not true. When emotions or hearts have been broken or emotions have been damaged, many times that changes the relationship forever. It's changed forever. You may be close. You may even be closer, but it's quite possible you may not be as close. And so you got to manage your expectations. You can have a great meeting. You can put everything out on the table. There can be sincere tears, sincere repentance, confession. It can be a wonderful experience. It doesn't mean that the relationship will be better. It doesn't mean the relationship will return back to what it was formerly. It's quite possible you may not have a close relationship, and that's okay. You've done what God has asked you to do. That is to reconcile. That is to forgive. That is at least to open the door for a possible relationship that honors God. And that's what's most important, that we do and keep our hearts free of bitterness, free of the anger, free of the stuff that hinders our walk with God, and that we're open. And then the last one, number 5, seek a third party as a mediator. And I believe in mediators. That sometimes the issues can be so contentious that we need a third party that both parties deeply trust to be objective, to be unbiased, to actually give their opinion and to help two people work out their differences. And I definitely see that in the New Testament. When there's a difference, you're supposed to go to that individual, maybe take 2 or 3 people. I think the whole point is not to put somebody in check, but to help people work out their differences. Paul talks about that also in the book of Philippians with the 2 women that were arguing there. Somebody needs to sit down and help them work out their differences. And I think we need that. And so I want to encourage you, my brothers and sisters, if you do need to forgive, forgive. If you do need to reconcile, walk through those steps and watch God work through you and make you a better disciple. And then the last issue that this episode raised that I thought was very, very important was the issue of discipleship. What does it mean to be a true follower of Jesus? And I thought this episode 2 by 2 nailed it. And in a sense, you can kind of summarize the words of Jesus and what the charge of Jesus to his disciples with this statement. A true follower of Jesus is committed to the mission of Jesus. A true follower of Jesus is committed to the mission of Jesus. And you see that in that scene where Jesus is having dinner at Peter's house and he's talking about the mission. If you go back and look at Mark chapter 6, which is the text that we just gave you, Mark 6 verse 7 and Matthew 10, you will, and if you were to read that passage as you watch the show, you'll notice that passage is really detailed as to how Jesus gives them the charge to go out. They're to embrace the mission. They're to carry forth the message of the gospel further. And here we see kind of a premiere, a foretaste. We see kind of an appetizer, a trailer of what will be the mission for the church, where Jesus will say in Matthew 28, go into all the world, preach the gospel, make disciples. That's what we're supposed to do. We're literally communities that carry forward the mission of Jesus. I was doing a little bit of church history study, and one of the things that helped the church grow significantly in the 3rd century until it became the dominant religion in the Roman Empire was their ability to reach out to those in need. They became family for the vulnerable. They became family for the locked out, the marginalized, those that were abused as slaves, those that were taken captive of prisoners of war. All these individuals, immigrants that were treated harshly because they were not Roman citizens. All the individuals that the Roman society didn't want. The church says, look, you can be family here. Tremendous outreach, tremendous evangelism, tremendous discipleship, but creating a community of care. Boy, isn't that something we need today? Too many times we spend more time trying to straight people up for Jesus rather than simply bring them to Jesus. And I think that's what we have to do. And so here, I would say first and foremost, what distinguishes us from cultural Christianity with true Christianity? And I'm saying true Christians or true Christianity is a Christianity that says a true follower of Jesus is committed to the mission of Jesus. And I hope that's where you find yourself, friend. It's not just simply going to church and we ought to go to church. It's not simply giving an offering and we ought to give an offering. But it's about being involved in the mission of Jesus in the world, whether through your local church, whether through other Christian organizations, some kind of outreach, some kind of evangelism, maybe some justice initiative. The question is the calling on your life connected to the mission of Jesus? That is what identifies us as his followers. So let's wrap this up with some discussion questions. Number one, very quickly, what are your thoughts about the mission of Jesus? In your own words, what does it truly mean to be? What does it truly mean to be a follower of Jesus? Should we go to church? Yes. We need the routine. Don't have time to go into that. But yes, we need church. We need community. Should we give offering? Yes, we should give an offering. Should we be involved in ministry? Yes. But really, more importantly, how is God calling you to be a part of his mission? I think that's the dominant question. In what way is your current life aligned with the mission of Jesus? Do my current activities actually agree with what Jesus is trying to do in the world. And here's the struggle we have as Christians, that there can be things that we're doing that's not necessarily sinful, that God doesn't say, you know what, that's not evil, that's not sinful, but it's in conflict, or it draws me away from the mission of Jesus in the world. We're in a day where it's not necessarily sin that dominates our landscape, but it's idolatry, and surely good fun and travel and all the stuff we can do digitally, that is the new idol. And many times we can spend more time in those things rather than dedicating our time to the mission of Jesus. And so that's a question we ought to all put to ourselves. Does our lives align with the mission of Jesus in the world? And then the last one, number 2, what are your thoughts about forgiveness and reconciliation? Is there someone you need to forgive? Is there someone that the Lord is saying you need to reconcile with? Do you need to go through those steps? Do you need to bring your heart before the Lord? Because forgiveness is a challenge. But this is a discipline that we are, as Christians, that designates us as his people. We forgive. We reconcile. That's what we do. That's what makes us his followers. That's what distinguishes us from the rest of the people of the world, because we let go and trust God with these issues. God bless you, my brothers. God bless you, my sisters. Trust me, God has a purpose for your life. He's working. Let him have your way. Let his spirit touch you to do what he's calling you to do, and watch God bless you in a profound way. We have one more summary video that I want to do just to kind of summarize where we've been with this whole series, The Chosen, and then we'll be going into our next Bible study series. God bless you. Thank you for joining us, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.